Mr. President.
The senator from Colorado.
Mr. President, thank you very much for that recognition. I come to the floor today to talk about jobs and about one sector in particular. Maybe we should have a job sector to fix this desk, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. One job sector in particular that's created tremendous economic growth in Colorado and across the United States, and that's wind energy and the jobs that it's brought to our state. During last Thursday's markup in the Finance Committee, we worked in a bipartisan fashion to include a 2-year extension of the production tax credit, known as the PTC, and the investment tax credit, known as the ITC, for wind energy. The wind credit has enjoyed broad bipartisan support from both sides of the aisle over a number of years, ranging from its original champion, continues to be a champion, Senator Grassley from Iowa, to my friend and colleague from Colorado, Senator Mark Udall, who's been a tireless and relentless supporter over the years for our wind energy jobs in Colorado. And I know he'll be a supportive advocate when the extenders bill reaches the floor. If enacted into law, the extension of the production tax credit and the investment tax credit will continue to drive job growth in my state of Colorado. Mr. President, I sometimes hear people around here say the government shouldn't pick winners and losers in their critique of the wind energy tax credits, and I actually agree with that notion. But what I would say to people listening to this on the TV is that when you hear someone in Washington say you shouldn't pick winners and losers, that's when you should hold on to your wallet, because they say that as if those decisions haven't already been made, as if winners haven't already been produced in the tax code somewhere deep in the last century, or the regulatory code, or the statute books. It's a reminder to ask yourself, who's more likely to have benefits in this town? Is it the incumbent industries that have been working on these for decades and decades, or is it the innovators in our economy? And of course, it's the legacy firms that have the upper hand in these debates, time and time again. And I don't blame them for fighting for that advantage. But I also know they're not necessarily going to be the industries that are going to create the 21st century jobs that we need. And that is fundamentally the debate that we're having, whether we know it or not. It's not a left-right debate in this town. It's a future versus past debate, and it's critically important to the next generation of Americans that we get this right. This is an updated version of a chart that I've been bringing down here, Mr. President, for the last 4 years that shows some interesting relationships of lines relating to our economy. The top chart is GDP growth in the United States. That's the green line. And here's the recession right here. You can see that we're actually producing much more as an economy today than we went into the recession, much greater gross domestic product. This is the unemployment level, and you can see at the depths of the recession the destruction in jobs that the presiding officer saw in his home state, and we saw it in my home state, in that very difficult period we were in. But we've actually begun to add jobs again, and we're almost back to where we were. I think we are about back to where we were in terms of job creation. But this is a very stubborn and difficult issue for the people at home, for the people that I represent. This shows what's happened to median family income, median household income over periods of economic growth and over periods of economic decline. A way of thinking about that line is what is happening to middle-class income in this country. And what's happening is that middle-class income, the growth in middle-class income, has decoupled from our economic growth. And that, among other things, has produced the worst income inequality that we've seen in this country since 1928. And I would argue, with the educational outcomes we see for kids, the most significant opportunity gap that we've had in our lifetimes, Mr. President. Why has this happened? There are a variety of reasons, but let me call your attention to this line. This is the productivity index in the United States. This shows how productive and efficient our economy has become. And it has become incredibly efficient, partly because of the use of technology, that's true, partly because of the reaction to competition from overseas, from China and India, partly because the recession itself, which you can see, drove the line straight up because firms had to figure out how to get through with fewer people. That's our challenge. That's our central economic dilemma as we move into the second decade of this 21st century. And it's my view that there are two principal answers to that challenge. The first is education. I'm not here to talk about that tonight, but just as a reminder, we're not going to recognize ourselves in this new century if we continue to perpetuate a set of outcomes in our K-12 system where if you're born poor in the United States, your chances of graduating with a college degree or the equivalent of a college degree are roughly 9 in 100. That's completely unsatisfactory and completely outrageous, particularly for the kids we're talking about. But the other is innovation. We have got to make sure we've got the most innovative economy in the United States, and whether we're willing to lead the world, because it's the companies that are started next week, the week after that, the week after that, the venture-backed companies that today are just somebody's bright idea in their garage, but tomorrow could become the next Apple or the next Google. This is where the job growth is going to come from. This is where the wage growth is going to come from. And in my view, the win credits cut right to the core of whether we're going to compete in a global economy. We're not talking about some fly-by-night experimental industry here. This credit has triggered tremendous economic growth in Colorado across the country. In Colorado alone, these tax credits support directly 5,000 jobs in Colorado. Vestas, which manufactures wind turbines, employs over 1,400 workers across 4 factories in our state, from Pueblo all the way up I-25 to Brighton and Windsor. They've already hired 400 new workers this year, with another 450 projected to be added before the end of 2014. Mr. President, this is it, right here, bricks and mortar, real jobs, made in America, Mr. President, made in America. And it's not just manufacturing and design jobs near urban centers. It's also construction and operation jobs at the actual wind farms. One Thursday night, I left this floor, as I do almost every week. It was a Friday morning, I guess. I flew back to Colorado. I got in the car. I drove up to Pete's, where we have a wind farm up there. I climbed up to the top of a wind turbine. I thought that was it. I was in the pod at the top. That's not the technical term, but that's what it was. And I thought I could then go home. And Mr. President, I got up there. They opened up a trap door in the ceiling, and then I had to climb out on the roof of this thing, swaying over the Wyoming border in the very shoes I wear on the floor of the United States Senate. That was an uncomfortable feeling, even though I was clipped in. But there was a guy up there who was one of the operators, one of the workers there, who said, I would never have this job in this community if it were not for this wind farm, if it were not for something that somebody imagined several years ago but was unimaginable a decade ago. I would not have this job in this community. This industry drives economic growth across our state, from the conference rooms of tech startups in Boulder and Denver all the way to the 6,000-acre Kit Carson wind power generating site just west of the Kansas state line. And these are good jobs, Mr. President. In 2012, median household income for a single male in this country was just under $37,000. Compare this figure to jobs in the wind industry, and these are all from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Crane and wind tower operators have a median annual wage of over $47,000. Electricians on wind, these are jobs that can't be exported overseas, Mr. President. They can't be exported overseas. Electricians on wind projects average nearly $50,000 annually. Land acquisition specialists who secure the land where wind projects are located have a median salary of $74,000, and site managers for wind projects make over $100,000 per year. So if you were looking for a way to say, you know what, we'd like to see median family income start to rise again in this country instead of going down, whether we're in a period of economic growth or a period of economic decline, you might start to look at things like the wind industry. These are good-paying jobs, and we're seeing more and more of them in Colorado and all across the country. The production tax credit has driven $105 billion, $105 billion in private investment, Mr. President, opened up 550 industrial facilities, and provided $180 million in lease payments to farmers, to ranchers, to landowners who host wind farms. Wind power accounts for more than a third of all new U.S. electric generation in recent years. It's moved our state toward a more diversified and cleaner energy portfolio. Colorado is in the lead in many ways, and we're proud of that. Most important, 70% of a U.S. wind turbine is produced right here in the United States, and that creates 80,000 American jobs. If you travel the highways of my state, you will see these component parts of these wind turbines moving from one plant to another, reflecting manufacturing jobs right here in the United States of America. So I am delighted, I'm glad that we're moving to restore the wind credit that expired at the end of last year. We've seen this before, where the PTC expires without a prompt extension, and it doesn't end well. Each time the credit has expired in the past, new installations fell between 76 and 93%. Dealing a blow to the industry and its employees. And a reminder once again that what we do here, or what we don't do here, actually matters out there in the real lives of real people. I know I sound like a broken record, Mr. President, but the world is not waiting for us to get out of our own way. We can't keep going through this unnecessary political boom and bust cycle. I'm pleased the Senate Finance Committee took an important first step last week by reporting out a 2-year extension. We need to follow that up with good work by bringing the extenders package to the floor and passing it into law. That outcome will give us much needed certainty to our industries and help secure the economic future for Colorado families who work in the wind industry. With that, I thank the President for allowing me to speak tonight, and I yield the floor.